The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine courtyard of Willowbrook Academy, where manicured lawns and ivy-covered buildings spoke of generations of privilege. Among the sea of designer backpacks and luxury cars dropping off students, 17-year-old Zara Williams moved with quiet determination, her left leg supported by a sleek titanium brace that caught the light as she walked. Zara had been born with a rare condition that affected the development of her left leg, requiring multiple surgeries and the permanent use of a brace. But what others saw as a limitation, she had learned to see as part of her story. Her dark eyes held a depth that spoke of challenges overcome and strength earned through adversity. She pushed through the heavy oak doors into the academy's marble-floored lobby, where clusters of students gathered in their usual hierarchies. The whispers started almost immediately, as they had every day for the past 3 months since her family had moved to this affluent suburb. "There she goes again," came the voice of Madison Pierce, whose father owned half the commercial real estate in town. Madison stood with her usual entourage near the trophy case, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her uniform somehow more pristine than everyone else's. "I still can't believe they let just anyone in here now." Zara's jaw tightened, but she kept walking. She had learned early in life that responding to every slight would leave her exhausted and defeated. Instead, she focused on the weight of her backpack, the familiar rhythm of her slightly uneven gait, and the breathing techniques her mentor had taught her. "Hey, disability girl." The voice belonged to Trevor Montgomery, Madison's boyfriend and the star of the lacrosse team. His father was a judge, and Trevor carried himself with the casual arrogance of someone who had never faced real consequences. "Didn't you hear Madison talking to you?" Zara stopped and turned slowly. The lobby had grown quiet, other students pretending to check their phones while actually watching the confrontation unfold. This was daily entertainment at Willowbrook Academy, where social hierarchies were as rigid as the academic standards. "My name is Zara," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tremor of anger she felt building. "And I wasn't aware that Madison required a response to her commentary." Trevor's face flushed red. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he considered beneath his social standing. "You think you're funny? You think because your parents probably sued their way to get you in here that you can talk to us like that?" "I think," Zara replied, shifting her weight slightly, "that I have as much right to be here as anyone else. And I think that says more about your character than mine." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Madison stepped forward, her eyes narrowing with the kind of calculated cruelty that came from years of social privilege. "Let me explain something to you, Zara," Madison said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "This school has traditions, standards, and some of us have earned our place here through generations of family legacy and achievement. Others," she gestured dismissively at Zara's brace, "are just charity cases trying to prove they belong. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss." The bell rang, mercifully ending the confrontation, but Zara knew this was just the beginning. As students dispersed to their first period classes, she caught sight of a familiar figure watching from the second-floor balcony. Mrs. Henderson, the school's only black faculty member, gave her a subtle nod of acknowledgement before disappearing into the administrative wing. Zara's first period was advanced physics, one of the few classes where her intellectual capabilities couldn't be questioned. She had always excelled in STEM subjects, her mind naturally drawn to the logical patterns and mathematical relationships that governed the physical world. As she settled into her seat, she noticed Trevor and his friends whispering in the back row, their eyes occasionally flicking toward her. Dr. Patterson, the physics teacher, was explaining the principles of force and momentum when Trevor's voice cut through the lesson. "Dr. Patterson, I have a question about momentum. If an object has an uneven distribution of mass, does that affect its ability to maintain forward motion?" The question was innocent enough on the surface, but the snickers from his friends and the way his eyes locked on Zara made the underlying meaning clear. Dr. Patterson, either oblivious to the subtext or choosing to ignore it, launched into a detailed explanation of rotational dynamics. Zara felt her face grow hot, but she forced herself to focus on the lesson. She had learned that direct confrontation often only escalated situations, and she needed to pick her battles carefully. Instead, she raised her hand. "Dr. Patterson, could you also explain how objects with different structural compositions can actually demonstrate superior stability and efficiency in certain applications?" Like how prosthetics and braces often outperform natural limbs in terms of durability and precision? The question was brilliant, turning Trevor's veiled insult into an opportunity to showcase her knowledge while subtly addressing his underlying prejudice. Dr. E. Patterson's eyes lit up with genuine enthusiasm as he began discussing the biomechanics of assistive devices and their applications in modern engineering. Trevor's face darkened, realizing that his attempt to humiliate Zara had backfired. As class ended, he lingered by her desk while other students filed out. "You think you're clever," he said quietly, his voice carrying an edge of menace. "But being smart won't protect you from everything. Some lessons can't be learned from books." Zara looked up at him, her expression calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "You're right, Trevor. Some lessons can only be learned through experience, and I've learned quite a few." The threat in his eyes was unmistakable, but Zara gathered her books and walked out of the classroom with measured steps. She had faced bullies before, but something about Trevor's tone suggested this was different. This was personal. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of classes and corridor encounters. Madison and her friends had perfected the art of social warfare, their attacks designed to be subtle enough to avoid administrative attention, but devastating enough to isolate their target. They would fall silent when Zara approached, then burst into laughter as she passed. They would occupy the tables around her during lunch, speaking loudly about topics designed to exclude and demean. "I heard she doesn't even live in the district," Madison was saying during lunch, her voice carrying across the cafeteria. "My father says there are programs that bus in kids from the inner city to meet diversity quotas. It's really unfair to the students who actually belong here." Zara sat alone at a corner table, mechanically eating her sandwich while the conversation swirled around her. She had dealt with isolation before, but the systematic nature of the harassment at Willowbrook was different. These weren't random acts of cruelty. They were calculated psychological warfare designed to break her spirit. "They're talking about you again," said a quiet voice beside her. Zara looked up to see Jamie Chen, a sophomore who had been one of the few students to show her any kindness since her arrival. Jamie was slight and soft-spoken, the kind of student who survived by remaining invisible. "I know," Zara replied, taking another bite of her sandwich. "They talk about me every day. Doesn't it bother you?" Jamie asked, glancing nervously toward Madison's table. Zara considered the question carefully. "It bothers me," she said finally, "but not in the way they want it to. They want me to feel ashamed, to feel like I don't belong. Instead, it just reminds me how much work there is to do." Jamie frowned. "Work? Changing systems, challenging assumptions, proving that strength comes in many forms." Zara's voice carried a quiet conviction that made Jamie sit up straighter. "My parents didn't move here and sacrifice so I could hide from bullies. They moved here so I could show people like Madison and Trevor that their assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't are wrong." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Trevor appeared at their table, flanked by two of his lacrosse teammates, Marcus Webb and Dylan Cross. All three were tall, athletic, and carried themselves with the casual confidence that came from never having their authority questioned. "Well, well," Trevor said, his voice loud enough to carry across the cafeteria. "Look what we have here. The charity case and the scholarship kid having a little meeting." Jamie instinctively shrank back, but Zara remained perfectly still, her dark eyes fixed on Trevor's face. "Is there something you need, Trevor?" she asked, her voice level. "Actually, there is," he replied, pulling out his phone. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about experience being the best teacher. So I thought maybe you could give us a demonstration." "A demonstration of what?" Trevor's grin was predatory. "Well, you seem to think you're as good as everyone else here, despite your obvious limitations. So why don't you show us how well you can keep up? Let's see you run a lap around the cafeteria." The request was designed to humiliate. Zara's brace made running difficult and painful, and doing so in front of the entire student body would provide exactly the kind of spectacle Trevor was hoping for. Other students had begun to notice the confrontation, their conversations dying as they turned to watch. "I don't think that's necessary," Zara said quietly. "Oh, but it is," Trevor insisted, his phone now clearly recording. "See? I think you've been pretending to be something you're not, and I think it's time everyone saw the truth." The cafeteria had gone completely silent now, every eye focused on their table. Zara could feel the weight of their expectations, the hunger for drama that seemed to follow her everywhere at Willowbrook Academy. If you're enjoying this story of courage and standing up to bullies, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you would do in this situation. Zara stood slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. She could feel the familiar anger building in her chest, but underneath it was something else. A cold, calculating calm that she recognized from her training. "You want to see what I can do?" she asked, her voice carrying across the silent cafeteria. Trevor's grin widened. Absolutely. What happened next would be talked about at Willowbrook Academy for weeks to come. Instead of attempting to run, Zara stepped back from the table and dropped into a perfect fighting stance. Her left leg, brace and all, was positioned with surgical precision, her weight distributed in a way that maximized both stability and mobility. "I've been training in Taekwondo for 12 years, she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had earned every belt through blood, sweat, and determination. "I've competed in state championships, won gold medals, and trained with some of the best instructors in the country. My brace isn't a limitation, it's an adaptation. And adaptations, Trevor, often make us stronger than we were before." The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the quiet girl who had been enduring their harassment for months. In her place stood a warrior, someone who had been forged in the fires of adversity and emerged with unbreakable resolve. Trevor's confidence wavered for the first time. "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Zara asked, and with a movement so fast it was barely visible, she executed a perfect spinning kick that stopped just inches from Trevor's head. The precision was surgical, the control absolute. If she had wanted to make contact, nothing could have stopped her. The cafeteria erupted in gasps and murmurs. Several students began applauding, while others pulled out their phones to record what they were seeing. Trevor stumbled backward, his face pale with shock and embarrassment. You can't do that," he stammered. "This is assault." "Actually," Zara said, settling back into a relaxed posture, "this is self-defense. You were recording me without permission, trying to humiliate me in front of the entire school. I simply demonstrated that I'm not as vulnerable as you assumed." Mrs. Henderson had appeared at the edge of the cafeteria, drawn by the commotion. She watched the scene unfold with a mixture of pride and concern, knowing that while Zara had won this particular battle, the war was far from over. Trevor's humiliation was complete, but Zara knew better than to celebrate. Students like Trevor didn't handle public defeat gracefully, and she had just made herself a target for escalation. As the lunch period ended and students began filing out, she caught sight of Madison's face across the room. The girl's expression was no longer one of casual disdain, but of calculating hatred. The afternoon brought a new kind of attention. Word of the cafeteria incident had spread through the school's social networks with viral speed. Some students looked at Zara with new respect, while others seemed to view her as a threat to the established order. The hallways buzzed with whispered conversations and furtive glances. In American history, Mr. Davidson was discussing the civil rights movement when Trevor raised his hand. "Mr. Davidson, I have a question about the methods used by civil rights activists. Don't you think that responding to prejudice with violence just perpetuates the cycle of conflict?" The question was clearly directed at Zara, another attempt to paint her as the aggressor in their ongoing conflict. Mr. Davidson, a well-meaning but often clueless teacher, took the bait. "That's an excellent question, Trevor. The debate between peaceful protest and more militant approaches has been central to every social justice movement in American history." Zara felt her temper flare, but she forced herself to remain calm. She raised her hand. "Mr. Davidson, I think it's important to distinguish between violence and self-defense. When people are being systematically oppressed or harassed, defending themselves isn't perpetuating violence. It's refusing to be a victim." The classroom fell silent. Every student understood the subtext of the exchange, the way the historical lesson had become a proxy for their own school's social dynamics. "Furthermore," Zara continued, her voice growing stronger, "the civil rights movement succeeded not because activists were passive, but because they were strategic. They understood that real change requires both moral authority and the willingness to confront injustice directly." Mr. Davidson nodded enthusiastically, missing the tension in the room. "Exactly. The most effective movements have always combined peaceful protest with strategic action." Trevor's face was flushed with anger, but he remained silent for the rest of class. As students filed out, he lingered by Zara's desk once again. "You think you won something today," he said quietly, "but this is just the beginning. You have no idea what you've started. Zara looked up at him with calm eyes. I know exactly what I've started, Trevor. The question is, are you prepared for what comes next? The threat was mutual now, the lines drawn with crystalline clarity. As Zara gathered her books and headed for her locker, she felt the familiar weight of impending conflict. But she also felt something else, a sense of purpose that had been growing stronger with each passing day. She had come to Willowbrook Academy to get an education, but she was beginning to understand that her real purpose here was bigger than that. She was here to challenge a system that had operated unchallenged for too long, to prove that strength came in many forms, and to show that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply refuse to be broken. The final bell rang, and students began streaming toward the exit. Zara moved with the crowd, her brace clicking softly against the marble floor, her head held high despite the whispers and stares that followed her. She had no illusions about what lay ahead. Trevor and Madison wouldn't let this humiliation stand, and their parents' influence would make them dangerous enemies. But she also knew something they didn't. She had been underestimated her entire life, and she had learned to use that underestimation as a weapon. They saw her brace and assumed weakness. They saw her skin color and assumed she didn't belong. They saw her quiet demeanor and assumed she could be easily broken. They were about to learn how wrong they were. As she pushed through the heavy oak doors into the afternoon sunlight, Zara felt the familiar calm that came before a storm. The real battle was just beginning, and she was ready. The next morning brought a new level of systematic harassment that left no doubt about Trevor and Madison's intentions. Zara arrived at school to find her locker defaced with cruel graffiti, stick figures with exaggerated limps and slurs that made her stomach turn. The hallways seemed to part around her as she walked, other students either staring openly or pointedly looking away. Zara! Jamie Chen appeared at her side, breathless and obviously distressed. Did you see what they did to your locker? This is horrible. Zara examined the damage with clinical detachment, noting the crude artwork and the deliberate placement at eye level for maximum visibility. It's exactly what I expected, she said quietly, opening her locker to retrieve her books. They're escalating because public humiliation didn't work. But you have to report this, Jamie insisted. This is vandalism, this is harassment. This is nothing, Zara interrupted, her voice carrying a weariness that spoke of years of similar incidents. Trust me, Jamie. I've seen worse. And I've learned that reporting it usually just makes things more complicated. As if summoned by their conversation, Vice Principal Morrison appeared around the corner. Richard Morrison was a thin, nervous man who had built his career on avoiding controversy rather than confronting it. His eyes took in the graffiti with obvious discomfort. Miss Williams, he said, his voice tight with barely concealed irritation. I understand there's been some vandalism involving your locker. Yes, sir, Zara replied evenly. As you can see. Morrison glanced around the hallway, noting the other students who had gathered to watch the interaction. Well, we'll have maintenance clean this up immediately. In the meantime, I'd like to speak with you in my office about ways we might prevent these kinds of incidents in the future. The phrasing was telling. Not investigate or punish the perpetrators, but prevent, as if the problem was Zara's presence rather than the harassment she was experiencing. In Morrison's office, the conversation went exactly as Zara had anticipated. Sitting across from his desk, she listened as he explained the importance of fitting in and not causing disruptions in the school environment. You understand, Miss Williams, that Willowbrook Academy has a certain culture, a tradition of excellence that's been carefully cultivated over many years. When new students join us, especially students from different backgrounds, it can take time for everyone to adjust. Different backgrounds, Zara repeated, her voice flat. You mean black students, students with disabilities, students whose parents didn't graduate from here? Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I'm simply suggesting that sometimes the best way to prevent conflicts is to avoid behaviors that might be perceived as confrontational. Such as, well, yesterday's incident in the cafeteria, for instance. Several students reported that you made threatening gestures toward other students. That kind of behavior simply isn't acceptable here. Zara leaned forward slightly. Mr. Morrison, I was being harassed and recorded without my consent. I demonstrated that I was capable of defending myself if necessary. At no point did I threaten anyone or make contact with anyone. Nevertheless, several students felt intimidated by your actions. Perhaps it would be better if you tried to resolve these conflicts through more traditional channels. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, with Morrison offering various suggestions that all amounted to the same thing. Zara should make herself smaller, quieter, less threatening to the established order. When she finally left his office, she felt the familiar weight of institutional bias settling on her shoulders. The day's classes passed in a haze of subtle harassment. Trevor and Madison had organized their campaign with military precision, ensuring that Zara was isolated, mocked, and undermined at every turn. In biology, her lab partner conveniently forgot to show up, leaving her to work alone. In English, Madison's friends monopolized the class discussion, making pointed comments about people who don't understand our cultural references. But the real escalation came during lunch. As Zara sat with Jamie at their usual corner table, Trevor approached with his phone already recording. "Hey everyone," he announced loudly. "I want to introduce you to Willowbrook's newest superhero. She's got a metal leg and a bad attitude, and she thinks she can intimidate people with her martial arts moves." The cafeteria fell silent, all eyes turning toward their table. Zara felt the familiar calm settling over her, the same feeling she got before competitions when the pressure mounted and everything came down to focus and execution. "I'm not looking for trouble, Trevor," she said quietly. "Oh, but trouble found you anyway," he replied, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who believed he held all the cards. "See, I've been thinking about what happened yesterday, and I realize I may have been too hasty in my judgment. Maybe you really are as tough as you pretend to be." He gestured to his friends, who moved to surround Zara's table. "So here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a chance to prove it. Right here, right now." "Trevor, stop," Jamie whispered, but his voice was barely audible above the sudden murmur of excited conversations around them. "All you have to do," Trevor continued, "is get up and walk out of here. But you have to do it without your little metal crutch. Show everyone that you're not just pretending to be normal." The request was designed to be impossible. Zara's brace wasn't decorative. It was a medical necessity that allowed her to walk and maintain her balance. Removing it would leave her vulnerable and potentially cause her to fall, creating exactly the kind of humiliating spectacle Trevor was hoping for. "I'm not going to do that," Zara said calmly. "Oh, but you are," Trevor replied, his grin widening. "Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of fraud you really are. I'm going to make sure everyone understands that you're not some brave warrior. You're just a disabled girl who's been lying to herself about what she can do." The words hit their target with surgical precision. Zara felt the familiar surge of anger, but underneath it was something else, a cold fury that had been building for weeks. She stood slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. "You want to see what I can do?" she asked, her voice carrying across the silent cafeteria. "Absolutely," Trevor replied, his phone trained on her face. What happened next would be replayed thousands of times on social media, analyzed and debated by everyone from disability rights advocates to martial arts experts. Instead of removing her brace, Zara stepped back from the table and dropped into a fighting stance that was both beautiful and terrifying. "I've been training since I was 5 years old," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had earned every word through years of dedication. "I've learned to adapt every technique, every movement, every strategy to work with my body exactly as it is. You see this brace as a weakness, but I see it as part of my strength." She moved then, flowing through a series of forms that showcased not just her technical skill, but her complete integration of her physical reality with her martial arts training. Each movement was precise, powerful, and utterly controlled. The brace didn't slow her down. It was part of her, an extension of her will and her determination. The cafeteria erupted in applause, but Zara wasn't finished. She stopped directly in front of Trevor, close enough that he could see the unwavering determination in her eyes. "You want to humiliate me because you're afraid," she said quietly, but her voice carried to every corner of the room. "You're afraid that if someone like me can succeed here, it means your advantages aren't as important as you thought. You're afraid that merit and character matter more than family connections and inherited wealth." Trevor's face was pale with shock and embarrassment. He tried to speak, but no words came out. "But here's what you don't understand," Zara continued, her voice growing stronger. "I'm not here to prove I'm better than you. I'm here to prove that we all belong, that excellence comes in many forms, and that the only thing that should matter in a place like this is who we choose to be." The speech was met with thunderous applause, but Zara knew it would only make her situation worse. She had publicly challenged not just Trevor and Madison, but the entire social hierarchy of Willowbrook Academy. There would be consequences. As the lunch period ended and students began filing out, Mrs. Henderson approached Zara's table. The older woman's expression was a mixture of pride and concern. "That was beautifully done," she said quietly. "But you know it's not over." "I know," Zara replied, gathering her books. "It's just beginning." "Walk with me, Mrs. Henderson said, and they moved together toward the administrative wing. "I want to tell you about someone who might be able to help you." They walked in silence through the marble-floored corridors until they reached a small office tucked away behind the main administrative suite. The nameplate on the door read, "Dr. Angela Foster, Student Counselor." "Angela," Mrs. Henderson said, knocking softly. "I'd like you to meet Zara Williams." The woman who opened the door was in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She was clearly of mixed race, with features that spoke of both African and Asian heritage. "Please, come in," Dr. Foster said, gesturing them into her office. The space was warm and welcoming, filled with books and plants and photographs of students from various years. "I've been hoping to meet you, Zara. Your reputation precedes you." "My reputation?" Zara asked, settling into a comfortable chair. "Oh, yes," Dr. Foster replied with a slight smile. "The girl who's been shaking up the social order at Willowbrook Academy. The one who's been showing people that strength comes in many forms." Mrs. Henderson closed the door behind them. "Angela has been working with students here for 15 years. She's seen cycles like this before." "Unfortunately, yes," Dr. Foster agreed. "What you're experiencing isn't new, Zara. It's the inevitable result of challenging a system that's been designed to exclude people like us. But what is new is the way you're handling it." "I'm not handling it very well," Zara admitted. "I keep getting angrier, and I'm starting to think I might do something I'll regret." "Anger is appropriate," Dr. Foster said firmly. "What you're experiencing is injustice, and anger is the natural response to injustice. The question is what you do with that anger." She pulled out a folder from her desk drawer. "I want to show you something. These are incident reports from the past 5 years, reports of harassment, bullying, and discrimination at Willowbrook Academy. Want to guess how many resulted in meaningful consequences for the perpetrators?" Zara shook her head. 3, Dr. Foster said. 3 out of 47. The rest were dismissed, minimized, or resulted in the victims being counseled to adjust their behavior or find ways to fit in better. The statistics were damning, but they confirmed what Zara had suspected from the beginning. The system wasn't designed to protect her. It was designed to protect the status quo. "So what do I do?" Zara asked. "You do what you've been doing," Dr. Foster replied. "You continue to be excellent. You continue to challenge assumptions. And you document everything." She handed Zara a small device that looked like a pen. "This is a recording device. Legal in this state as long as you're part of the conversation. I want you to record every interaction, every incident, every conversation with administrators." "Why?" "Because individual incidents can be dismissed, but patterns can't. Because witnesses can be intimidated, but evidence can't be silenced. And because sometimes the only way to change a system is to expose it." Mrs. Henderson leaned forward. "There's something else, Zara. Dr. Foster has been working with a group of parents and community members who are concerned about the culture at Willowbrook. They've been gathering information, building a case for systemic change." "What kind of change?" Zara asked. "The kind that requires outside pressure," Dr. Foster replied. "The school board, the state education department, maybe even federal civil rights investigators. But we need documentation, evidence, and someone brave enough to be the face of the challenge." The weight of what they were asking settled on Zara's shoulders. They weren't just asking her to defend herself. They were asking her to take on an entire system, to be the catalyst for change that could affect generations of students. "I need to think about this," she said quietly. "Of course," Dr. Foster replied. "But while you're thinking, I want you to remember something. You're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for every student who's been made to feel like they don't belong, every kid who's been told their differences make them less than, every person who's been asked to make themselves smaller to make others comfortable. This is about to get intense. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on because stories like this one show us what real strength looks like. What's your prediction for how this ends? Drop it in the comments below." The conversation continued for another hour, with Dr. Foster explaining the legal and practical aspects of documenting harassment and building a case for systemic change. When Zara finally left the office, her mind was spinning with possibilities and fears in equal measure. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of classes and concerned looks from teachers who had heard about the lunchtime confrontation. As the final bell rang, Zara found herself walking slowly toward the parking lot, her thoughts heavy with the weight of decision. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the black sedan that pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, revealing a man in his 50s with perfectly styled hair and an expensive suit. "Miss Williams," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I'm Judge Montgomery, Trevor's father. I think we need to have a conversation." Zara felt her heart rate spike, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm sorry, Judge Montgomery, but I don't think that's appropriate. If you have concerns about your son's behavior, you should speak with the school administration." "Oh, but I think you misunderstand," he replied, his smile cold and calculating. "I'm not concerned about my son's behavior. I'm concerned about yours." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Zara glanced around the parking lot, noting that they were relatively alone. Her hand moved instinctively to the recording device in her pocket. "I don't understand what you mean," she said carefully. "I think you do," Judge Montgomery replied. "You see, Miss Williams, I've been hearing some disturbing reports about your behavior at school, threatening other students, creating disruptions, making claims about your abilities that, frankly, seem exaggerated." "I've never threatened anyone," Zara said firmly. "Haven't you?" he asked, pulling out his phone and showing her a video. It was footage from the cafeteria, but it had been edited to make her defensive demonstration look aggressive and threatening. "This looks pretty threatening to me. In fact, I'd say this looks like assault." Zara's blood ran cold. The video had been manipulated to remove the context, to make her appear to be the aggressor rather than the victim. In the edited version, Trevor's harassment was invisible, leaving only her response. "That's not what happened," she said quietly. "Isn't it?" Judge Montgomery asked. "Because I have multiple witnesses who say otherwise. Students who saw you threaten my son and his friends. Students who are willing to testify that you've been using your supposed martial arts training to intimidate others." The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Trevor had provoked the confrontation, recorded it, and now his father was using his position of authority to weaponize the edited footage against her. "What do you want?" Zara asked, though she already knew the answer. "I want you to understand your situation," Judge Montgomery replied. "You're a scholarship student at a prestigious school in a community where you have no connections and no protection. Your parents work hard to give you opportunities, but those opportunities can disappear very quickly if you're perceived as a threat to the safety and well-being of other students." The message was clear: conform, disappear, or face consequences that would extend far beyond the school walls. "I haven't done anything wrong," Zara said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Haven't you?" Judge Montgomery asked. "Because from where I sit, it looks like you've been deliberately provoking conflicts, creating disruptions, and now threatening other students. That's not the kind of behavior we expect from Willowbrook Academy students." He leaned closer to the window, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Here's what's going to happen, Miss Williams. You're going to apologize to my son. You're going to promise to avoid any further confrontations. And you're going to learn to appreciate the opportunities you've been given without causing problems for the students who've earned their place here. And if I don't, then you'll discover that there are consequences for young people who don't know their place. Consequences that can follow you for a very long time." The threat hung in the air like a physical presence. Zara felt the familiar surge of anger, but underneath it was something else, a cold determination that had been building for weeks. "I understand," she said quietly. "Good," Judge Montgomery replied, his smile returning. "I'm glad we could have this conversation. I hope we won't need to have another one." The sedan pulled away, leaving Zara standing alone in the parking lot. She waited until it was completely out of sight before pulling out her phone to call Dr. Foster. "Angela, it's Zara. I think I'm ready to talk about that documentation you mentioned." The conversation that followed lasted until well after sunset. Dr. Foster listened as Zara recounted every detail of her encounter with Judge Montgomery, her voice steady despite the tremor of rage she felt building with each word. "That's witness intimidation," Dr. Foster said grimly when Zara finished. "It's also abuse of power and potentially conspiracy. Judge Montgomery just made a serious mistake. How is it a mistake? Zara asked. He has the power, the connections, the ability to destroy my future with a phone call. He has those things, Dr. Foster agreed. But he also just revealed the extent of the conspiracy. This isn't random bullying anymore, Zara. This is systematic harassment backed by institutional power, and that's something we can fight. Over the next week, the pattern became even clearer. Trevor and Madison's campaign intensified, but now it had the subtle backing of administrative indifference and parental influence. Zara found herself called to the office repeatedly for minor infractions that other students routinely ignored. Her locker was vandalized twice more, but security cameras mysteriously malfunctioned during the incidents. Teachers who had previously been supportive began treating her with cool professionalism, but Dr. Foster had been right about documentation. Every conversation, every incident, every administrative meeting was now preserved in crystal clear audio. The pattern of harassment, institutional bias, and coordinated intimidation was becoming undeniable. Look at this, Dr. Foster said during one of their after-school meetings, spreading printouts across her desk. 17 separate incidents in 5 days, each one individually deniable, but together they paint a picture of systematic persecution. Mrs. Henderson leaned over the documents, her expression growing darker with each page. This is worse than I thought. They're not just trying to drive her out. They're trying to break her. They're trying, Zara corrected quietly, but they're failing. Every day they don't break me makes me stronger. It was true. The constant pressure had forged something unbreakable in Zara's core, a determination that grew fiercer with each new attack. She had stopped trying to avoid confrontation and started strategically planning for it. The breakthrough came during chemistry class on a Friday afternoon. Zara was working alone at her lab station. Her assigned partner had requested a transfer after pressure from Madison's friends when Trevor and Dylan approached under the pretense of borrowing equipment. "How's it going, Charity Case?" Trevor asked, his voice loud enough to carry across the lab. "Still pretending to belong here?" Zara didn't look up from her experiment. "Still pretending your father's position makes you relevant?" The response hit its mark. Trevor's face flushed red and he stepped closer to her station. "You think you're funny? You think making jokes protects you?" "I think," Zara replied, finally looking up at him, "that you're afraid everyone's starting to see what you really are." "And what's that?" "A mediocre boy with an inflated sense of importance who's never had to earn anything in his life. Someone so insecure about his own worth that he has to tear down others to feel significant." The lab had gone quiet, other students pretending to focus on their work while actually listening to every word. Mr. Peterson, the chemistry teacher, was at the far end of the room, apparently oblivious to the confrontation. Trevor's voice dropped to a whisper, but Zara's recording device picked up every word. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. My father can destroy your family with a phone call. Your parents' jobs, your scholarship, your entire future, all of it can disappear." "Is that a threat, Trevor?" Zara asked, her voice calm but carrying. "It's a promise," he replied, "unless you learn your place and stay in it." What Trevor didn't know was that Dr. Foster had arranged for backup documentation. Jamie Chen, despite his fear, had agreed to serve as a witness and had his own recording device. More importantly, Mrs. Henderson was monitoring the situation from the hallway, ready to intervene if necessary. "My place," Zara repeated thoughtfully. "You mean quiet, invisible, grateful for whatever scraps of acceptance you decide to throw my way?" "Exactly. Here's the thing, Trevor," Zara said, standing up from her lab stool with fluid grace. "I've already found my place. It's right here, excelling academically, challenging assumptions, and showing everyone that strength comes in many forms. The question is, what's your place going to be when people realize you're nothing without your father's influence?" The confrontation was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. In his anger, Trevor had knocked over a beaker of chemicals, sending liquid splashing across the lab bench. The sound brought Mr. Peterson hurrying over, his expression shifting from mild concern to alarm as he took in the scene. "What happened here?" he demanded. "Accident," Trevor said quickly. "Just a little spill." But Zara was staring at the spilled chemicals with a growing sense of dread. The mixture contained hydrochloric acid, and some of it had splashed toward her workstation. More importantly, some had landed on her brace. "Mr. Peterson," she said urgently, "we need to neutralize this immediately." The acid could damage the titanium and create a safety hazard. The teacher's expression shifted to genuine concern as he realized the potential danger. While he rushed to get neutralizing solution, Zara carefully examined her brace for damage. The acid had etched small marks into the metal, but the structural integrity appeared intact. "Are you hurt?" Mr. Peterson asked, applying neutralizing solution to the affected areas. "I don't think so," Zara replied, but she was thinking about something else entirely. Trevor's accident had been deliberately aimed at damaging her mobility aid, an act that went far beyond harassment into the realm of criminal assault. "We should document this," she said carefully, "in case there are any long-term effects." Mr. Peterson nodded, making notes about the incident, but Zara could see Trevor smirking in the background. He thought he had gotten away with it, that the accident would be dismissed as collateral damage from their argument. He was wrong. That evening, Dr. Foster convened an emergency meeting that included not just Zara and Mrs. Henderson, but also Zara's parents and a woman introduced as Sarah Martinez, a civil rights attorney who specialized in educational discrimination cases. "What happened today crosses a serious line, Dr. Owen," Foster explained, playing back the audio recording from the chemistry lab. "This isn't just harassment anymore. It's assault on a disabled student's mobility aid with the intent to cause harm." Attorney Martinez leaned forward, her expression intense. "This is exactly what we needed. Combined with the pattern of harassment, the administrative indifference, and Judge Montgomery's witness intimidation, we now have grounds for federal civil rights violations." Zara's father, Marcus Williams, had been silent throughout most of the meeting, but now he spoke up. "What does that mean for Zara? What are the risks?" "The risks are significant," Martinez replied honestly. "We're talking about challenging powerful people who have deep roots in this community. They'll fight back, and it could get ugly. But the potential impact goes far beyond Zara's individual situation." "How so?" asked Zara's mother, Dr. Keisha Williams, whose own experiences as one of the few black physicians in the area had prepared her for this conversation. "If we can prove systematic discrimination at Willowbrook Academy, it opens the door for federal oversight, policy changes, and accountability measures that could protect future students. But it also means Zara becomes the face of that challenge." Zara had been listening quietly, but now she looked up at the adults around the table. "What's the alternative? I keep my head down, try to survive until graduation, and hope the next student has better luck." "That's one option," Martinez replied. "It's not an option for me," Zara said firmly. "Not anymore. These people have made it clear that they see me as a threat to their system simply by existing and excelling. If I'm going to be a threat anyway, I might as well be an effective one." The decision was made that night to move forward with a comprehensive legal challenge. Martinez would file complaints with both the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights and the State Education Department. Dr. Foster would continue documenting incidents while building a coalition of supportive parents and community members. And Zara would continue being herself, excellent, uncompromising, and unafraid. The following Monday brought a new level of hostility that confirmed they were on the right track. Word had somehow leaked about the legal challenge, and the school's response was swift and predictable. Zara found herself under constant surveillance, with administrators finding excuses to observe her classes and monitor her interactions. "Miss Williams," Vice Principal Morrison said, intercepting her on the way to lunch, "I need to speak with you about your recent behavior." They walked to his office in silence, where Morrison closed the door and gestured for her to sit. "I understand you've been making some allegations about your treatment here at Willowbrook Academy," he began, his tone carefully neutral. "I've been documenting incidents of harassment and discrimination," Zara replied evenly. "Are you calling those allegations?" Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "I'm saying that these kinds of accusations can be very damaging to a school's reputation, very damaging to the opportunities of students who depend on that reputation." The threat was subtle but clear. Pursue this course and face consequences that would extend to other students. It was a clever attempt to weaponize Zara's sense of justice against her, to make her feel responsible for any collateral damage. "Mr. Morrison," Zara said quietly, "are you suggesting that I should tolerate harassment and discrimination to protect the school's reputation?" "I'm suggesting that sometimes misunderstandings can be resolved through dialogue rather than external intervention." "What kind of dialogue?" "Well, for instance, I've arranged for you to have a conversation with Trevor Montgomery and his family, a chance to clear the air and find a mutually acceptable resolution." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. Morrison was setting up another intimidation session, this time with official school sanction. "I don't think that's appropriate," she said carefully. "I'm afraid it's not optional," Morrison replied, his mask of reasonableness slipping slightly. "The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow after school. I expect you to attend." That evening, Zara sat in Dr. Foster's office with her parents and attorney Martinez, planning their response to what was clearly an orchestrated attempt at witness intimidation. "They're getting desperate," Martinez observed. "Setting up a meeting between Zara and the Montgomery family under school auspices? That's incredibly inappropriate and probably illegal." "So what do we do?" Marcus Williams asked. "We turn it into an opportunity," Martinez replied with a slight smile. "Zara attends the meeting, but she doesn't go alone. I'll be there as her advocate, and we'll document everything." Dr. Foster nodded approvingly. "They're expecting a scared teenager they can intimidate into silence. Instead, they'll get a legal proceeding." The next afternoon, Zara walked into Vice Principal Morrison's office with Attorney Martinez at her side. The room was crowded with what amounted to Willowbrook Academy's power structure. Morrison, Principal Davies, Judge Montgomery, Trevor, and Madison's father, Robert Pierce, who had apparently been brought in as additional pressure. "I wasn't expecting legal representation," Morrison said nervously. "Any meeting involving potential disciplinary action requires adequate representation," Martinez replied smoothly, settling into a chair beside Zara. "Shall we begin?" What followed was a masterclass in legal intimidation disguised as conflict resolution. Judge Montgomery spoke at length about the importance of community harmony and the dangers of outside agitators disrupting established relationships. Robert Pierce discussed the economic impact of negative publicity on local institutions. Principal Davies emphasized the school's commitment to all students, while making it clear that some students were more valued than others. Through it all, Zara remained calm and composed, answering questions honestly while Attorney Martinez took detailed notes and occasionally interjected with clarifying questions that exposed the underlying threats. "So let me understand," Martinez said during one exchange. "You're asking my client to withdraw her complaints about harassment and discrimination in exchange for what exactly?" "We're asking her to consider the broader implications of her actions," Judge Montgomery replied carefully. "To think about how her accusations might affect not just the individuals involved, but the entire school community, including her own future opportunities," Robert Pierce added. "Colleges look very carefully at a student's record of cooperation and community involvement. The threat was clear: comply or face academic and social consequences that would follow her beyond Willowbrook Academy." "I see," Martinez said, making another note. "And if she chooses not to withdraw her complaints?" The silence that followed was telling. Finally, Principal Davies spoke up. "We would hope that wouldn't be necessary. We're confident that with good faith effort from all parties, we can resolve these misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings?" Zara repeated quietly. "Is that what you call it when a student's mobility aid is damaged with acid? When a judge threatens a teenager in a school parking lot? When systematic harassment is ignored by school administration?" The room fell silent. For the first time, someone had stated the facts clearly and without euphemism. "Those are serious allegations," Morrison said nervously. "Yes, they are," Martinez agreed. "Which is why we've documented everything and filed appropriate complaints with state and federal authorities." Judge Montgomery's composure cracked slightly. "You've involved federal authorities?" "The Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights takes violations of disabled students' rights very seriously," Martinez replied. "As does the Justice Department when those violations involve conspiracy and witness intimidation." The power dynamic in the room shifted suddenly and dramatically. The men who had come expecting to intimidate a teenager now found themselves facing potential federal investigation. "I think," Principal Davies said carefully, "that we may have gotten off on the wrong foot here. Perhaps we should table this discussion until everyone has had a chance to reconsider their positions." "Perhaps," Martinez agreed. "In the meantime, my client will continue attending classes and documenting any further incidents of harassment or intimidation." As they left the office, Zara felt a strange sense of lightness. For the first time since arriving at Willowbrook Academy, she felt like she was fighting from a position of strength rather than simply defending herself from attacks. But she also knew that the real confrontation was still coming. Trevor and Madison wouldn't simply accept defeat. and their families had too much invested in maintaining the status quo to back down easily. The final battle was approaching, and Zara was ready. The final confrontation came during the school's spring showcase, where Zara was presenting her biomechanical engineering research. The gymnasium buzzed with parents and community leaders as she explained how adaptive technology could optimize athletic performance. "Fascinating work," said Dr. Elizabeth Chen from the University Advisory Board. "This research could help thousands of people." Trevor and Madison positioned themselves nearby, ready to strike. "Ladies and gentlemen," Trevor announced loudly, "I'd like to direct your attention to the most interesting presentation here today." The crowd gathered as Trevor continued with false enthusiasm. "Miss Williams has turned her personal challenges into academic opportunity. Perhaps she could demonstrate her martial arts adaptations." Zara recognized the trap, but realized refusing would seem defensive. She demonstrated biomechanical principles professionally, explaining how her brace affected balance and movement. "Very impressive," Trevor said, phone recording. "But what about real challenges? When someone doesn't just stand there?" "Trevor, that's enough," Dr. Chen intervened, sensing danger. Madison stepped forward with calculated cruelty. "I've heard wild claims about her abilities. State championships, gold medals, the kind that seem impressive until you realize they're in special categories." The insult hit its mark. Zara felt familiar anger rising, but underneath lay cold determination. This was her moment. "You're right, Madison," Zara said quietly, her voice carrying across the silent gymnasium. "Some achievements were adaptive categories, because that's fair competition. But I've also competed against able-bodied opponents and excelled. Excellence isn't about avoiding challenges. It's what you do with them. Prove it," Trevor challenged publicly. "Prove what exactly? That you're not just another charity case with delusions. Prove you belong instead of taking space from students who've earned it." Every eye focused on them. Zara saw Dr. Foster and Attorney Martinez entering, drawn by reports of confrontation. "You want proof?" Zara moved toward the microphone, her steps deliberate and controlled. "Ladies and gentlemen," her amplified voice filled the space, "what you're witnessing is exactly why I research adaptive technology." The crowd focused intently as she continued with growing confidence. "For 4 months, I've faced systematic harassment at this school. Called names, had my mobility aid damaged with acid, been threatened by a sitting judge, asked repeatedly to make myself smaller and less threatening." Judge Montgomery paled, realizing private threats were becoming public. "My research taught me that adaptation isn't accepting limitations. It's finding new ways to excel despite challenges. Real excellence threatens people who've never earned their advantages." She gestured toward Trevor and Madison, frozen in public spotlight. "These students tried proving I don't belong because of my disability, race, and economic status. They used parental influence for intimidation, enlisted administrative support to maintain status quo rather than address discrimination." Complete silence gripped the room. "But they've actually proven that systems maintaining standards through exclusion have no real standards at all." She retrieved a folder from her display. "I have recordings of every threat, every incident, every intimidation attempt. Documentation of administrative indifference and institutional bias. Evidence of conspiracy between officials and community leaders violating state and federal civil rights laws." Attorney Martinez moved forward, recording everything as Zara continued. "Trevor asked me to prove I belong, but I don't need to prove anything to him. I need to prove something to you. Adults with power to change a system that's failed every student not fitting traditional privilege molds." She faced the crowd directly. "I am Zara Williams, 3-time state champion in adaptive Taekwondo, 2-time open competition medalist, 4.2 GPA with research that could revolutionize adaptive technology. I've faced every challenge this school threw at me, and I'm still standing." Applause started with Dr. Chen spreading until it thundered through the gymnasium. "The question isn't whether I belong," Zara continued through the noise. "It's whether this institution is worthy of its students, all students, whether it can evolve beyond perpetuating privilege toward fostering excellence." She looked directly at Principal Davies. "I'm filing formal complaints with the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. I'm requesting full investigation into discriminatory practices. I'm demanding systematic changes ensuring no other student faces what I've faced." The gymnasium erupted in discussion as Trevor and Madison's social dominance crumbled. Judge Montgomery frantically called lawyers while Robert Pierce calculated political costs. "Miss Williams," Principal Davies stammered, "perhaps we can address misunderstandings through appropriate channels." "No," Attorney Martinez interrupted. "These are documented civil rights violations, witness intimidation, institutional failure. This is a federal civil rights case. The implications hit like a physical force. Parents pulled out phones while the facade of Willowbrook's prestige cracked in real time." Trevor desperately tried regaining control. "This is ridiculous. She's been threatening people." "Stop," Zara said quietly, but with such authority that he fell silent. "Just stop." She moved closer, stopping just near enough to make her point. "You spent months trying to make me feel small, using privilege and your father's position for intimidation, but you never understood. I wasn't fighting just for myself." Her voice strengthened, reaching every corner. "I fought for every student made to feel like an outsider. Everyone told their differences made them less than. Every kid asked to make themselves smaller for others' comfort. Because of your actions, your family's threats, this school's institutional bias, we now have evidence and legal standing to change things for everyone." The truth hit Trevor like a blow. In trying to destroy Zara, he'd given her tools to challenge the entire system protecting him. "You played yourself," Zara said simply, turning to address the crowd. The aftermath unfolded rapidly. Video circulated on social media. Willowbrook accountability trending nationally as civil rights organizations amplified the story. Judge Montgomery faced ethics investigation within a week. Principal Davies and Vice Principal Morrison were placed on administrative leave. The school board, facing federal funding loss and legal liability, implemented interim reforms and new leadership. Most significantly, the cultural changes were profound. Willowbrook's generational hierarchy cracked, replaced by genuine inclusion discussions. Other students spoke up about discrimination experiences. Silent parents and community members demanded accountability. Legal resolution came 6 months later. The Department of Education found systematic civil rights violations, mandating comprehensive reforms including bias training, new harassment policies, and federal oversight. The district settled Zara's complaint with college scholarships and research funding. Trevor faced suspension and community service with disability organizations. Madison's discriminatory social media posts cost her college opportunities. For Zara, the most meaningful change was simpler: walking Willowbrook's halls without fear, knowing her presence improved the institution for future students. On graduation day, she stood as valedictorian, addressing a now diverse graduating class. "Excellence isn't maintaining old privilege systems," she said, finding Dr. Foster and Mrs. Henderson in the audience. "It's constantly pushing ourselves and institutions to be better, more inclusive, more just." She paused, focusing on younger students who looked like her, kids with disabilities, those who would benefit from her courage-initiated changes. Change is never easy or comfortable, but it's always necessary and always possible when people stand up for what's right, especially when it's difficult. Thunderous applause followed, but Zara's attention was on the future: MIT biomedical engineering, research attracting medical device companies, and most importantly, an institution fundamentally changed by her refusal to accept injustice. Trevor approached after the ceremony, showing new maturity. "Zara, I owe you a real apology," he said quietly with genuine remorse. "Thank you," she replied simply. "I hope you've learned something." "I have. I learned that family name, father's position, social status. Those aren't real strength. Real strength is what you showed, standing up for what's right when everyone's against you." It wasn't complete transformation. Systemic change took generations, but it was a beginning. Walking across campus one final time, brace clicking softly on marble floors, Zara thought about the journey from scared newcomer to catalyst for change. She'd come for education, but discovered her real purpose, proving that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply refuse to be broken. Her legacy wasn't just personal achievement. It was systematic change, ensuring future students could succeed without sacrificing their dignity or authenticity. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.